I'm sure Ramesh will more than compensate for the absence of his uh, partner in writing this book. The name of this book makes us think a lot, because today in India, what is required is leadership, and leadership devoid of values is a big challenge, is a serious challenge, isn't it? Values without leadership does not lead us anywhere. So, what a wonderful name to the book, Leadership with Values, isn't it? Now, the authors of this book have a phenomenal pedigree. Mr. Ramesh Subramanian and Mr. Ramakrishnan. Together, they have about 60 years of experience, as I can see in their profile. That's phenomenal. Here is the brief introduction of Mr. Ramesh Subramanian. He hails from a small village by name Kalladakurchi, which has got a great culture and tradition to that. I've heard about it quite a lot. He moved to Chennai about three decades back. He studied in Calcutta, as I can see, in the Assembly of God Church, and he is also a student of Padma Seshadri Balabhavan of Chennai, and did his undergraduation with Loyola College. He went on to complete his post-graduation with UCLA. He is a post-grad in management as a management executive, and he is also a member of Leaders Excellence at the renowned Harvard Square. And he also holds a certificate of business acumen from NCR. So what a qualification. From Laila to from the US and also to the Europe. I think he has covered 3 continents here. He's worked across diverse industries. Started his career with Ernst & Young, as I understand. Moved on to Ford, IBM, Hewlett-Packard, Renault and Nissan. So started with audit and walked through IT and ended with auto. He has walked himself through the arena of finance and accounting. And I think he has built his leadership qualities and abilities in these, coming across these 2 important domains which form the fulcrum of any organization, that is finance. He is built with rich communication skills and people management abilities. Yes, I'm sure he has seen through tough and good times to be where he is today. Mr. Ramakrishnan is a man of no less experience and credibility. With about 40 years of experience, he has worked across India and in the US, as I can see his profile. He has worked across sectors such as pharmaceutical industry, agriculture, light engineering, and FMCG. His core competence has been in the areas of marketing, HR, and strategy. So I think together, these 2 people have their core competence built in amongst finance, marketing, HR, and strategy. Is there anything else left out? I think sales is the only function left out. Right? I'm sure their ability, they can cover that also. So they're more than competent to be able to think like a startup, act like an MNC, and bring the right solutions to people. That's why they have written this book. Mr. Ramakrishnan is also associated with a few startups. A startup by name Healthcare Academy, which handles healthcare management related topics. And he coordinates on workshops and seminars in healthcare and key healthcare issues. Both of them reside in Chennai. So here we have 2 eminent people talk about a book which carries a wonderful topic, goes by a wonderful name. I leave the podium to them to take it from here. All the best, Mr. Ramesh. Wish you a wonderful talk ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shivram. So just give me a moment. Thank you so much. It's a pleasure and a great opportunity and a wonderful platform for me to be addressing, the entrepreneurs and the charter members and also the other guests for the evening in this session, where I'll be covering the book that we recently launched. I mean, as recent as about 2 months back, titled Leadership by Values. And now I was just thinking, considering some of the other forums that both Professor Ramakrishnan and I addressed, so I had solid support from him in terms of explaining the background, why we wrote this book, what was the larger purpose that drove us to pen this treatise on leadership. So just about 10 minutes back, it felt like, I was getting into a boxing ring without a pair of gloves, which obviously is, my co-author, Professor Ramakrishnan, and he's almost double my age. He's an octogenarian. So that's an important point, Mr. Shivaraman. So, the ability to think, expedite, and then write at the age of 80 plus, I don't know how many of us will be able to even accomplish that. So I'll quickly share my screen. Just give me one moment, please. Saurav, can you quickly confirm if you're able to see my slide?
Yes, sir, I can view it.
Okay, thank you. So the topic for today, as the context was set, is about leadership by values. And once again, Professor Ramakrishnan and I would like to thank TiE Chennai and whatever all the efforts that they have been making through all these years in terms of fostering entrepreneurs and getting all of them together, and then keep all the entrepreneurial activity and the spirit of entrepreneurship binding in Chennai and through some of the other chapters that they have directly or indirectly throughout India. So, it's very important, and the contribution that entrepreneurs make to the overall GDP in India is quite significant. So both Professor Ramakrishnan and I tip our hat to TiE Chennai and all its charter members and guests today, and also some of its affiliates that are there throughout. So really thank you for whatever you've been doing, and thanks for the opportunity and the wonderful platform this evening. So here is the cover of our book, Leadership by Values. The subtitle is The Proverbial Quach of the Panglosian. So a fascinating thought that occurred in both Professor Ramakrishnan and my mind was, how do values manifest themselves in the human brain? And how does an individual or a leader, anybody who wants to live a life driven by values, go about executing it and then understanding the fundamentals, the core principles or core beliefs which drive us, and then how the values imbibe themselves in our mind and then translate themselves into action, and also how do we think that leaders should be practicing, and also ultimately reach a point where values are etched in the mind, so that both leaders, their organizations, and the larger world benefits over the longer haul. So that is, in a sense, what I'll be covering today. So quickly coming to the subtitle of the book, CWTCH is actually a Welsh word, exactly pronounced as Koch. It's not Koa or Ko. I mean, it's somewhere in between. So Koch. It's a Welsh word which, and the subtitle of the book is The Quach of the Panglosian. So Quach, whilst Quach is a Welsh word, Dr. Panglosian is a fictional character that appeared in Voltaire. He was a French philosopher. He wrote a novel, Candide, set in the 18th century. And Dr. Pangloss was the main idea of Voltaire's novel at that point in time. And that was the central idea of the novel, which meant the best of all possible worlds, which also represented inadequacy in optimistic thinking. Nonetheless, when somebody goes through Voltaire's satire, he actually ends it by saying that we all must cultivate our own gardens, which essentially means I mean, for our context here, leadership by values, it essentially means that whilst leaders should be optimistic, they carry a huge responsibility upon themselves in terms of immediate action and also have an ideal level of optimism. So that is precisely the reason why we chose this subtitle for the book, and this is the larger message that we wanted to give out to leaders and everybody else who were keen on adopting values and attempting to make this world a better place for all of us to move ahead. So that's about the subtitle of the book. On this slide, I thought these three quotes were very interesting, especially the first one, which is Max D. Pree. So where essentially he speaks about the responsibility of a leader is to define reality. And then the first responsibility, is to define reality. And the last is to say thank you. In between, the leader is a servant. So one of the traits of leadership, which has been oft spoken about in the last 10 to 15 years, is servant leadership. And I will touch upon that a bit later as we move ahead in our session. Ken Casey also makes a very valid point where he says that you don't lead by pointing and telling people some place to go. You actually go to that place and then make a case for yourself, and then you start referencing it. Benjamin Franklin was not far enough. And we chose this because, we had quite a few ideas that we wanted to share. So given the book that is out there, Benjamin Franklin actually said, if somebody doesn't want to be forgotten after they are dead and rotten, so either they should write things worth reading or do things worth the writing. So that's quite an impactful statement, not to be left behind of all the three. So moving on, the premise of penning this treatise on leadership are fourfold. The attempt here is to foster a values-based organizational culture, attempting to help leaders tide over challenges and understand some of the key leadership challenges of today and how a values-based approach can actually help them. The other premise, which is actually not listed here, is whilst Professor Ramakrishnan and I were thinking through before we started penning this treatise on leadership, is when we largely look at whatever is happening in the entrepreneurship space, in the corporate space, in India, in Asia, across Europe, US, and everywhere across the globe, there seems to be a gap in terms of leaders towing values, walking the talk, and then relating this back to some of the core beliefs, basis which humanity has progressed across billions of years or millions of years. So we really saw there was a conspicuous gap there. So it is a very humble attempt by us to make this world a better place for all of us, akin to a cog in the wheel. And we also wanted to, given the situation of the pandemic, we also wanted to infuse a dose of positivity, which we thought was very, very important. And last but not the least is to reach aspiring leaders and everybody else who want to lead a life driven by values. So that is precisely the premise of penning this book. Moving on, one of the key things that we wanted to address through this book, and I also wanted to talk about, was leadership essence. And I've got three examples here that I would like to speak through today. The first thing, we have addressed it in our first chapter, Leadership Essence, the Essence of Leadership. The Chicago Address by Swami Vivekananda. So this goes back to the year 1893, incidentally, which was also the 400th year since Christopher Columbus had discovered America. And this was happening in the Art Institute in Chicago. Incidentally, about 15, 16 years back when I had visited Chicago, I made it a point to visit the Art Institute, and there is a bust of Swami Vivekananda there. And I was elated and overjoyed to see it. So this was the World Parliament of Religions, where there were representatives from all the religions, Jains, Swami Vivekananda represented in the Zoroastrianism, Christians, and everybody. So everybody had to give an introduction speech, whilst everybody else had written speeches and they were rehearsing it. Swami Vivekananda actually decided to speak off the cuff, and constantly he was praying to Goddess Saraswati, as we all know, as one of the goddesses in the Hindu pantheon. And then on the day that he was supposed to speak, he postponed his speech from the morning to the afternoon. And as soon as he took the podium, the first words that he uttered was, "Brothers and sisters of America." So the moment he finished that sentence, "Brothers and sisters of America," 5 words, I mean, it threw the audience into such an ecstasy and an instant connect that everybody stood up, and then they gave him a standing ovation for a few minutes, which literally did not die down. I rarely remember in the last 140 or 50 years of any leader who's been able to make such an impact. I'm sure they would be certain, but I'm certainly not aware of such an instant connect as Swami Vivekananda was able to make back in the late 19th century, 1893, of such an instant connect. And this is really fascinating. So this throws open a very important aspect of leadership, which is presence. Leadership is all about being present at the moment, being there. The ability to connect with your audience instantly and get this sort of a reaction is something unfathomable. And Swami Vivekananda was able to accomplish that, I mean, as if it was a cakewalk for him, and he did it. And the rest, as they say, is history. He went on to speak about Hinduism, and then, he took Hinduism from the shores of India. And, Chennai has a very close connect. We have the Vivekananda House, and it was some of his core disciples in Chennai who ensured that he got the funding for him to be on a ship and then travel all the way up to the US and then make an indelible mark about Hinduism in far-fetched lands where Hinduism was probably not as well known until Swami Vivekananda arrived in the scene. So that is the first example. The second example that I wanted to quote was, after writing our book, we've been reaching out to a lot of leaders to elicit, what were their views about leadership by values, and also get some feedback about the book. So we reached out, Professor Ramakrishnan and I have reached out to a lot of leaders, and the most impactful of all of them was Sri Ratan Tata. So the underlying statement there in the interaction with Sri Ratan Tata's office is a simple yet very, very impactful response. Ratan Tata's office came back to us and then said that he personally would like himself to be excused because he was not in a position whenever we reached out to him to do a review of the book, but he wished the book and the authors a very successful launch. And he also followed it up with a couple of messages asking if the launch went well. And he also sent a couple of more messages after that, about a month after the launch of the book in the month of August, asking for a copy of the book to be sent to the Tata's house in Mumbai, and also followed it up with another mail saying that the office was closed the office remains closed due to the pandemic, and as soon as it opens, he would let us know, and then we could actually ship a copy to him. So this encompasses what leadership is all about. So it's not just about getting across, running a powerhouse like Tata, but these simple things. And for all you know, Sri Ratan Tata doesn't even know us, and we are absolutely debutant authors, trying to do something, trying to make a very small contribution in attempting to make this world a better place for all of us, and then sharing whatever we have learned from some of our mentors and leaders under which we have worked. So this was, this has had a profound impact on us. And the third person that I would like to quote today is Mr. Yonason Goldson. He calls himself an ethics warrior. He's based in the US. He's a leadership coach and a mentor. He's also a keynote and a TEDx speaker. So in one of his posts on LinkedIn, he shared a very interesting story about a Jewish rabbi, Safra. So this story is about Rabbi Safra, who was a merchant. And then incidentally, he discovered a very expensive gem with himself. And then he was holding it. Another gem merchant who actually came to know that Rabbi Safra had this, one day visited Rabbi Safra, came to his house, and then saw that the rabbi was actually in his prayers at that point in time when he stepped into the house. And then he called out to the rabbi and then said that he would like to buy the special, very precious gem that Rabbi Safra had with him, and then he quoted a certain amount. He waited for a few minutes, and when he did not see any response from the rabbi, he actually increased his price. So there was a second level of price that he quoted. And yet there was no response from the rabbi. So he went on and then he quoted an even higher price, thinking that maybe the rabbi was not very interested in the price that he was quoting. And obviously, the gem would be much more precious than whatever price he was quoting. So after some time, as he kept on waiting, the gem merchant, the rabbi finished his prayers, and then he opened his eyes and then looked at the gem merchant and just said that he was more than happy to sell the precious gem to the gem merchant at the first price that he quoted. So the gem merchant was a bit shocked, and then he couldn't understand as to what was happening, because initially he thought that the first price that he quoted was very less. So he increased the price that he wanted to offer for the precious gem the second and the third time. But the rabbi was very clear. He did not, according to him and in his mind, what was interplaying was, given the fact that he was praying, he was not able to respond to the gem merchant when he quoted his first price. And in his mind, he did not think that it was fair enough for him to take the last highest price quoted by the gem merchant. So this tells us very clearly that he stuck to his principles and core beliefs, despite the fact that at that point in time, he could have agreed for the final ultimate higher price that the gem merchant had offered, and then sold the gem to him. So this tells us a very, very important lesson of not veering away from our principles or values, whatever may be the situation. So this is a very important example that I thought I should quote and share with all of you in this esteemed forum today. Moving on to deconstruct the book into a shorter format. Essentially, we are trying to, as I said earlier, both Professor Ramakrishnan and I, we are trying to, it's it's a humble attempt that we're making to delve into the mind of a leader and understand, how values interplay in somebody's mind and how that translates into action. And we would like to raise a toast to the leader. We all have leaders in us, and let us all pledge together to make this world a better place for all of us. And one of the key things that the pandemic has taught all of us is, I think, for years together, we have disassociated ourselves with so many things, and this pandemic's actually given us the time and the space to connect ourselves back to some of our core beliefs. And values is a very important facet of that. So that, in a sense, is the synopsis of our treatise. And to add an anecdotal piece of information is, it's a very short book. It's just 144 pages. And I'm sure it'll be absolutely Professor Ramakrishnan and my honor if you can, whenever convenient, if you can pick up the book. There is also a Kindle version available if you read it, and then if you can share your feedback, we would be absolutely honored. So moving on, the central idea of the book is a values framework model that we have represented on the book, which essentially begins with core values, imbibed values, practiced values, and edged values. And we will talk about some of the details of all these aspects as we move on. So here is the diagram of a tree. So we thought one of the best representations of the CIPE values framework model was in the form of a tree. Essentially because, a tree has, its firm roots, then it has its very strong trunk, and then it has its branches, the leaves, the sprouts, and then, it has its fruits. So essentially, comparing our values framework model to a tree, the root would represent the core values, the trunk, the imbibed values. And then the branches and the leaves, over a period of time, it is like, values akin to values which are being practiced. And then finally, when we have the fruits, those are, edged values. And this is a continuous process. And towing the line of values is obviously a continuous process that everybody has to do, especially leaders, when they are at the helm and running large organizations, and even, entrepreneurs like you all when you run your own businesses. So both Professor Ramakrishnan and I thought that there was no better representation than a tree. What we've done is we've also represented, the values framework model, the CIPA model, in a pyramidal form, with the core at the bottom moving on to imbibe, practiced, and edged. So the attempt for anybody, especially leaders who are aspiring to live a life driven by values, is to move from C to I to P and then E's when they reach an ultimate state of practicing values. And the values which have manifested themselves in their mind, it is translated to action, into action, and leaders are able to walk the talk and be able to display that in a very consistent form. So it's quite fascinating when we thought through the whole process, and we were penning our thoughts when we put it on paper. So in terms of core values, some of the principles are, core values represent basic tenets, or these are some of the fundamental beliefs or the rubrics of values, or something which is absolutely uncompromising. So this is, in a sense, core values. Moving on, in terms of the values framework model to imbibe values is imbibed values is that which is passed on to us, which we assimilate over a period of time, and we also absorb it. And on the book, in the book, we have represented the interplay of values from an individual to the organization, and it can flow in real time, it can flow in different ways. We've also tried to cover the impact a society has on an individual and an individual has on a society. So this is passed on from one person to the other, from one section of the society to the other. And we have also tried to cover it as part of the author journey at the end, which is called Author Speak, where we've tried to portray whatever we have learned that has been passed on to us through our families as a family credo, and then also strengthened by way of whatever we observed when we used to live in those large joint families, which was a tradition probably decades back in India. It is one of those rare traditions or family bonding opportunities that we had. And I don't know how many of us still live in joint families. If yes, and the pros and cons of joint families are absolutely fabulous, and especially the pros quite remarkably outweigh the cons. And both Professor Ramakrishnan and I have experienced it firsthand, like many of you all would have. So whatever it is that we have seen happen amongst ourselves in the milieu that we have grown up in the social environment, in the family environment, we automatically imbibe those values. And at a perplexed age, when we are young, maybe we would not realize what we are actually imbibing. But at a certain point in time, both Professor Ramakrishnan and I felt that the values do manifest themselves. I mean, if we're very honest and earnest about it, and then we want to hold on to the credo, and then make sure that we hold on to values which become unassailable, and then a very distinct as well as a very imminent part of our lives. We would definitely refer back to imbibe values which have been passed on and we hold very dear to ourselves. So that is in a sense about imbibed values. In terms of practicing values, after our adolescence, we get to college, all of us, we start looking at various avenues to start working. And then that's when we actually start giving back to our families, the society, and the world at large. So it is very important that at that point in time, whatever core beliefs that we've had and that we've learned from our family and the society, and that we've imbibed through all these years, we're able to practice that. We try and test them, and we also accomplish as we move on in our professional careers and lives. I mean, either be it in the way of working for a corporate company or also running our own businesses or enterprises. And I'm sure we have a lot of entrepreneurs, who've been doing the line of values, and you must have found the journey very, very interesting. And I'm sure you can share some insights as we get into question and answers at a later point in time during this session. Excuse me. Last but not the least, in terms of the values framework model, is etched values, which was the top of the pyramid and also depicted on the tree. So when values get etched, it gets it's imprinted in our minds, and it's important that we're absolutely steadfast about it. And excuse me, we hold on to that, and then the ability to be able to sustain these values and then ensure that it translates into action will certainly help individuals and organizations and businesses over the longer haul. And this is absolutely supported by data, and I will share that in some of my further slides and examples. In terms of core values, I wanted to share a few examples. One of the examples is there is this LV Prasad Eye Clinic in Hyderabad. And I mean, whoever is associated with Hyderabad will definitely know it is one of the leading eye hospitals there. So a professor at ISB Hyderabad did a survey for about 10 months and about 2 years back, where he actually took Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and then he mapped what are the different things that employees need when they work in a company or an organization vis-a-vis what the company or organization can offer. And then to his surprise, LB Prasad obviously has a lot of doctors, nurses in attendance, and eye specialists, quite obviously. So to his surprise, two things that stood out as the reason why doctors or employees stuck with LB Prasad for a very long time was two things. The first one being the give back that employees were able to, the give back that employees were able to do to their immediate society was the number one cause that somebody stayed with LB Prasad and worked with them for years together. So the second most important factor was about 70% of the doctors categorically came back and said their opportunity to learn, interact with the immediate society, and also the investment that LB Prasad Eye Clinic was making in terms of training these doctors and giving them avenues for research, and then helping them make new discoveries in terms of curing and making an impact on the larger world was the second most important reason. So mind you, a very important message that comes out of this is it was not about the work environment, it was not about the salary, it was not about other benefits or other perks or bonuses or anything else that we think is the most important thing. So it was about the impact that somebody was able to make to the society, and also the ability to learn and then continue and then build on the impact and make. This is a true example of making the world a better place. There cannot be any better thing than giving vision to someone and then being able to cure somebody's issue or a problem that they have with their eyes. So this was a very revealing research that happened. The second example I would like to quote today is about Microsoft, Satya Nadella. I don't know how many of you all are aware, but Satya Nadella has an issue with his son, a medical issue with his son, and whilst dealing with that issue, he came across, and then he realized at a certain point in time that empathy is a very, very important thing, and it can actually drive organizations to play a leading role in terms of contributing to their immediate society and also making a very, very large and measurable contribution to the world. So when Satya Nadella stepped in, he made sure that some of the learnings that he had whilst dealing with his child was brought into some of the core values of the organization. And mind you, a very important aspect of Satya Nadella's approach there, he was not trying to impose whatever were his beliefs onto the organization. He made sure that he understood the ethos of the organization and then he matched it to his, and then he made a very good concoction and a combination, and then established an excellent values-based culture in Microsoft, which stands even to this day, and which probably stands Microsoft in good stead, and it's been doing extremely well over the longer haul. Last but not the least, the third example that I wanted to share was, the terrorist attack which happened in the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel. I'm not able to recall the year on the top of my head, but this was this was a day where, unannounced, 2 or 3 terrorists, walk into the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai, and they start firing randomly at the guests there. So what would anybody do in such a situation? The obvious reaction is, people would run away to safety outside of the hotel or any possible place. But what happened during this terrorist attack in the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel in Mumbai was something unbelievable and unimaginable. There were around 1,700 guests that day, 500 signed in guests. There were 700 guests who were visiting the various around 10 restaurants that the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel had, and another 700 people who were actually staff of the hotel. The 700 people who were staff of the hotel on that day, the attack started in the evening and then it lasted for almost 2.5 to 3 days. Not even a single employee of the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel left. They ensured that of the 1,700 people who were there holed up inside the hotel during this deadly attack, 1,666 people were escorted to safety. Once an employee of the hotel would escort a few people out, they would come back to the hotel, escort more people, and ensured that, unfortunately, ensured that except 34 lives, which were unfortunately lost that day, more than 95% of the people were escorted out to safety. And this is something phenomenal and unbelievable, which senior leaders within the Tata Group and even Shri Ratan Tata himself could not explain. So this was display of values, clinging on to core beliefs, because one of the things that the employees were taught during the training were that the guests of the hotel were the ambassadors of the hotel, and it was absolutely incumbent upon the employees to ensure that the first and topmost priority for them was the safety of the guests. So this was a display of leadership, and from the lowest level to the highest level. So this depicts a very important dimension of leadership, that leading by values or displaying values or the manifestation of values need not necessarily be a top-down approach. It can be a bottoms-up approach, and sometimes you don't know, at the spur of the moment it happens, and it is an unbelievable fact that 700 people displayed the same attitude, the same belief, the same steadfast behavior over 2.5 to 3 days, and it was not a normal situation. It was one of the deadliest terrorist attacks that ever happened. And this actually eventually became a case study at Harvard, and one of the professors, while diving deep, found out that whilst hiring the Taj Mahal Palace Hotel actually did not go to tier 1 cities, they actually went to tier 2 cities, and whenever they hired employees, one of the key questions that they asked was, the schools and colleges where they were hiring from, they asked was, please give me a list of students who have been very respectful towards their teachers or their parents. So see, it's a very different way of looking at things, and see the outcome at the end of the day when 700 plus another 500 guests are there, and the employees were able to escort them out. So the important dimension that they looked at during hiring really helped them to tide over the crisis when this attack happened. So this is a very important learning, that values can flow in all directions and need not necessarily be. So I think the lesson there in the third example for all of us is, I think we have to be all ears and all eyes to make sure that we learn how to display values at the right moment. And of course, the manifestation obviously has to happen on its own. So these are some of the examples that I wanted to share from a core value standpoint. Imbibe values, I thought I should talk about punctuality, returning phone calls, and keeping words, because at least from my experience, and also whatever Professor Ramakrishnan shared with me when we penned this book, was these are things that we have picked up on our way during our fabulous professional journey that we've had. 40 years for Professor Ramakrishnan and 20 plus years for me. Punctuality, and it is almost a buzzword in the corporate sector. Oh, Indians. So if you say 5 o'clock, I think you will not arrive until 5:30 p.m. And I don't know if that perception has still changed. And they say that the perception is the truth. So punctuality is a very important thing. I still remember 20 years back when I used to work in Ford, every afternoon, right after lunch, the lunchtime used to be somewhere between 1 and 2. So immediately after lunch, we used to have something called a standing meeting where our super boss would ensure that we all have a quick meeting for the day, about 30 minutes, 20 to 30 minutes, but all of us would have to stand. So this essentially did two things. One is we were made to stand and then burn a few calories, which probably he would not have thought of at that point in time, because during the pandemic, I figured out that a lot of us, a lot of the employees who are working from home have a setup where they actually essentially stand for 6 to 8 hours, and they say that when you stand and work, you actually burn more calories than when you actually exercise. So this was one thing, and that standing meeting also helped us kill. If generally there is a tendency, as soon as we have lunch, to 10 or 15 minutes, we could probably feel a little drowsy or a little tired. And given that we have only 3 kinds of weather here in Chennai, which is hot, hotter, and hottest, or summer, summerer, and summerest. It helped. Even if there was an iota of siesta in us, it ensured that we were not getting into that mode. So, but mind you, I remember at least we would have had 50 such meetings every week, at least once or twice a week, and every single time our super boss used to make it on time, not 1 minute before, not 1 minute after. And even 20 years hence, if I and some of my other colleagues that work with me in Ford, we are able to still recall this with so much passions, it is entirely up to my super boss, who displayed punctuality in its very essence and made sure that we never lost sight of the word, both in remembrance and also in action. Returning phone calls. Off late in the last few years, I see that when I'm trying to call a lot of people, a lot of them, I don't want to quote any percentages here, a lot of them don't even return the calls or do not even respond back saying that, I'm busy, I cannot return your phone call. It is important for us to return calls or messages in a timely fashion, because when somebody is trying to call us or message us, they are giving their time to us. So it is important that we acknowledge their time and the priority that they have given to us in returning our phone calls and also responding back. So that is very important. Keeping our word is very important. It might sound very silly, but I think whenever we say something, it's extremely important that we keep our word and then we stick to it. And in certain instances at home, when I've not kept my word, my wife has been very vociferous about it, saying that don't let words just come out of your mouth if you cannot really keep it. So it's been a reminder every once in a while, and then I make a very honest attempt to keep my word, although I would not claim to be 100% perfect there. In terms of practiced values, a couple of important pointers that I wanted to bring about was, I already touched upon reminders at home, and every once in a while, my wife also comes back to me, and Professor Ramakrishnan has also shared this with me that he's come across this at home. Every once in a while, people at home keep reminding. About 3 days back, my wife said, you've written a book on leadership by values, and an important thing that you have covered is walking the talk. So you make sure that you're walking the talk at home. So that was a reminder. So I had to step back and think through whatever I was doing. What I've observed through the pandemic for the last 8 to 9 months is the solid support that governments across the world have given all their citizens, and that is nothing but an excellent display of values which are being practiced, because it's not just about us but everybody else in this world. So there cannot be there cannot be a better example of practiced values than the solid support that governments across the world have displayed during the pandemic. Last but not the least, in terms of our framework of values, is the EST values, the recall and manifestation, the constant practice, and making sure that all of us as leaders and individuals elevate ourselves to ensure that whatever core beliefs that have been passed on through our families or the society or our colleagues, friends, in our professional journey or in our personal journey, those are rest, and we're able to recall it, pray to God that it manifests, and we all are able to make a solid contribution in making this world a better place for all of us. And so this is the elevation that we're talking about, moving from core to edged values. So in terms of some of the key takeaways from today's session is, values, life is a continuous journey and it is a continuous process of learning, and we should always remember that wherever we are, whatever we are doing at any point in time, we are able to step back, think through our actions, and then keep values as a premise of whatever we do, and then learn continuously from it. Another way of looking at it is, what is our individual stance as an individual, or as an individual of the larger society, and as a citizen of this world, what is our stance vis-a-vis the framework model that we are representing in our book. One thing that both Professor Ramakrishnan and I would recommend is, before all of us sleep, at the end of the day, if we can spend 15 minutes maintaining a values journal, and then noting down whatever we have done through the day, what are the values which manifested, or what are the things that we did not do right, and what is it that we should correct. This has a huge impact, and what will happen is, when we do this values journal just before sleep, it will kind of manifest itself in our brain, and then there is a much better chance that it will recur at a right point in time for us to be able to toe the line of values. I also wanted to share some of the endorsements that we received in our book. One, Mr. Harsha Rajan, Chief Officer of an oil tanker, said that the book is very insightful and easy to understand, and it provides several case studies which is reader friendly. Material has been presented in a very crisp manner, and the brief that the authors have mentioned also gives a humane touch. A practicing chartered accountant and company secretary from Mumbai said he really enjoyed the book and it kept him engrossed, and he got to know a lot more about values-based leadership, especially in today's pandemic time where we do not get to see each other's body language. Last but not the least is Professor Mahesh Hariharan from the Indian Institute of Science Education and Research, Trivandrum. He is a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and incidentally, he holds 50 plus other fellowships from different universities and organizations from around the world. So he encapsulated the entire book in a couple of sentences, saying that it's a brilliant compilation of Eastern and Western values, and the need for naive optimism and empathy for a healthy society has been vividly narrated in the book. And one of the greatest lessons in leadership about humility is what both Professor Ramakrishnan and I learned from Professor Mahesh Hariharan, because during one of the conversations that we had with him, he said that, in chaste Tamil, he said, I'm just an ordinary chemistry teacher, a simple chemistry teacher, an ordinary chemistry teacher in a very small school. Only for us to figure out later that he is actually an associate editor of the Journal of the Royal Society of Chemistry, and he holds 50 plus other fellowships, and he is also a fellow of the Royal Society of Chemistry. There cannot be any better lesson in humility, and both Professor Ramakrishnan and I just bowed down our our head to his humility and his grounding. And I wanted to share some of the initiatives that we are trying to drive through the proceeds of the book. A portion of the proceeds of the book will go towards feeding poor and also help building flood shelters for tribal villages in Sundarbans, which is in West Bengal. And Saurav told me that after this session, he would certainly send a mailer. So anybody who wants to buy the book can get a 10% discount on the publisher's website, Notion Press's website. If you use the coupon code LaunchDhamaka. The book is also available as a paperback and a hardback on Amazon India and across all Amazon markets. It's also on Flipkart, and it is also available as an ebook on Kindle. And thank you for the wonderful opportunity and the platform today, TiE Chennai, and all the guests and the charter members who have dialed in. And through this opportunity, I've had the humble experience of sharing whatever little we could bring out in this short treatise of 144 pages. And we wanted, through this image, we wanted to once again reiterate our values framework model, which is the central idea of the book, which is, core values, imbibed values, practiced values, and nest values. Thank you once again. And I think we can go to the question and answer session now.
Thank you, sir. So if there's anyone who has any questions to ask, you can feel free to type it in the chat box or click on the hand raise button. We will unmute you and you can ask the question directly. We'll just give a minute for them to type the question.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay, Mr. Kannusamy has raised his hand. I'll just unmute him.
Thank you, Ramesh. It was a very nice talk. Are you able to hear me?
Yes, I can hear you very well. Thank you, sir.
Very nice. It is very nice, especially for I think I want this to reach at the school. I am from Vidya Mandir. I'm the president of the Vidya Mandir Alumni Association. And as a policy for any birthday or any other event, I don't give bouquets. I only give books.
Okay.
Okay. So one question is that today we have slowly about in the annual reports, we find the CSR activities than the other activities being reported in the annual report. I don't know how many companies really give value leadership and evaluation of leadership in particular companies. Okay. So I think this is a very interesting area which is need to be done. And I think we should come out with saying that how do we evaluate leaders in each organization attached to the annual report, whether the leaders have got values, how it's a scoring out of a balanced scorecard, how it is important. So I think I don't know how many companies will come out of this leadership values and so on. In fact, the MLDA foundations I've been also myself a leader, and I've been since the COVID, I've been a leader in helping the Malapur slums of 63. Wonderful, sir. Thank you very much indeed. I've asked few questions. The CSR report, the great book, and also you ought to reach to the students. Actually, very important. The root. You said the core is the root. So I think the schools is a very important platform. And thank you very much. And I thought I should share this thinking about the book as a gift, as well as the CSR, an annual report to be included on leadership and values.
Absolutely, sir. I think, thank you for your valuable and wonderful comments. You're absolutely right. You'll have to catch them young, whilst in the schools, if you can give them a solid training in terms of values, the core beliefs that, we as a society and we as Indians have learned from our families and, from the larger society at large, it is extremely important. And, values in themselves are something very abstract. I don't know that any organization or any university for that matter has been able to put a measure on the values. It is something abstract. So, and I don't know how much of a thorough research. I do know of a lot of studies and papers and research, but I have not really come across a real measure of this is the benchmark and this is where you stand in terms of values. There is, of course, one of the, I would like to quote this example, one of the longest studies that has happened for about 7 odd decades, and I think it is one of those Ivy League universities in the US, is about what makes human beings very, very happy. And I will link this back to values quickly, okay? So the biggest thing that stood out was, if as an individual, what stood out for 60, 70 years is, if as an individual if I have a story to tell about myself, point number one. And the second thing is, if I have a group of personal friends where I can vent out or share all my feelings, these are the two main aspects of happiness which human beings have. And this study has been sustaining itself for the last 60 to 70 years. And also linking this back to the earlier example that I quoted in terms of LV Prasad Eye Clinic, an employee, they stick on to the organization not for the salary or anything, but the impact that they're able to make to the larger society and the world at large. So you're absolutely right, sir. Both Professor Ramakrishnan and I would be extremely elated if you thought that we could step into the school and then talk to the students, or if you thought that you wanted to buy a few copies of the book and then keep it in the library, or even share it with some of your students. We'll be more than happy to do that, sir. And you're absolutely right. The CSR initiative, which has been happening for the last few years, even as a mandate, and we get companies get a tax break on that. This is a very important thing, and I don't want to share the other side of the CSR. I think as an organization, as an institution which is grooming future leaders, I think values, the importance of values, the core beliefs or the credo that we are carrying from our families and the larger society, and the belief, and having this kind of a values-based mindset inbuilt into the minds of the students when they're in school itself, not only in Vidya Mandir, across all the schools in Chennai, Tamil Nadu, every other city and state in India, will go a long way in making excellent future leaders for our country over the longer run. So thank you, sir. Your comment is very well appreciated.
In fact, I would like to volunteer my help, because of course I'm now 70, but I was abroad for about 30, 40 years. I come back, and I want to make sure that what are the activities like you are percolate and spread over entire place. And this what we are going to multiply. We are going to photocopy leaders actually of good values. And as you are right actually, but I think you should also meet Mr. Gopalakrishnan of Tata Group, who's on the who's very good actually on the values. For example, I'm also a Vedic student where Satyam Vada Dharmam Chara Atithi Bhava. So I think I just don't want to take much of your time. My aim is to offer my services. I'm a consultant to Tatas and TVS. Please, if you want any help from my side in terms of reach, I'm willing to offer. So that's nothing else. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. So thank you for bringing those points, sir. If you look at the first 7 pages of our book, we have quoted 4 tenets from our scriptures. The first one being Vasudhaiva Kudumbakam, Tattvamasi, Loka Samasta Sukhino Bhavantu, and Yadbhavam Tadbhavati. And the first line of our book is a quote from Sri Adi Shankaracharya, which which is a line from his book, from his treatise called the Tattva Bodha, which is about Samadhanam Kim Chittai Ekagritaha, which means that the mind and the body should not rest until its ultimate goal is achieved, which is a similar thing that Swami Vivekananda also shared and said that, arise, awake, and sleep not until the goal is achieved or accomplished. So we have mixed both Eastern and Western values in our book. So we've done that, and we'll be more than happy to.
In my next book, it should say, Buddhir Atma Atmanastasya Enatmi Jitaha. Mind is a own friend and enemy. And you can take it forward, because I just finished Ambi Parameshwaran's book on rejection, on spring. And I'm very proud, because I want people like you, authors. Today we thought only English people, like the Robin Sharma's, the man who sold the Ferrari, or so many other books have come in. So I think it is important, like authors, like not only that, you should also teach people to how to write books, how to bring out values. I think we have to make sure that people like you are taken out. And also, I want Ramesh Subramanian, I want about 100 people like this in India to come out, and you have to have an institution of that.
Oh yes, absolutely, sir. See, just to quickly share with you, we have actually applied for a trademark for the CIP values framework model. And in the next 10 to 15 years, we want to take this across to all corporates, educational institutions, not only in India, but across the world. And then, imprint this values framework model, because I think as a nation, and we are very strong rooted in values, and we can give a much larger message to this world. And it doesn't matter if we are sitting in one corner of Mylapore.
Very true. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, sir.
Any questions? Yeah, Ms. Sudha.
Hello.
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Yeah. Good evening, everyone. Mr. Ramesh Subramanian, thank you for this very, very lucid, detailed talk about your book. And one of the things is really simple, at the same time effective. So one of the things that I would like to add in terms of practice, when we practice, a certain, code of ethics, leadership, appreciation is one point that came out of when you said pandemic, COVID support, and government. Very, very often we forget to appreciate. So one of the great leadership qualities that I would think is very, very important at all stages is appreciation. So that's one point that I did want to make, because I did see that come out when you spoke of government and COVID. Okay, so that's one thing that I wanted to, I wanted to bring out. And when you said you are collecting, the proceeds of the book for certain causes, one of the things that I did think, of course, the previous, the person when he spoke about Vidya Mandir and everything, I thought this book should be, written in greater simplicity so that children can read, because now that the core is there, maybe that's something that you would do or someone else can help you do it, right? So I thought if it's the core values were brought down further for children to read, then what we are talking about, that we want to reach out to the world, will really help. The last thing that I wanted to say was this book can be you can translate it to Tamil, Kannada, and all. Universities come forward to pick up the books, and they have the funds to do it. So I've been responsible for a couple of books, and certain universities, like different states, we may need to ask, and they will bring it out in their languages, and there will not be an expense on your side. So this is something that I also wanted to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am, for your wonderful comments, and it is very, very encouraging to hear those comments. So to your first point about appreciation, and I have always felt that, and in many of my organizations, I have been mentored by my leaders saying that even if it's a very small task, a pat on the back or a little appreciation always goes a very long way in getting teams motivated. And as you said, just to share with you, in a lighter vein, except the subtitle, which is of our book, which says it's the proverbial Kwacha the Panglossian. Everybody else found the book, the English is pretty plain speak, and it's quite easily understandable. But as you rightly said, when it comes to children, in primary school or secondary school, maybe we'll have to break it down and then give it to them so that they can understand it easily, and then be able to relate it at their level in terms of the activities that they do and how they link it back to the core beliefs or the imbibed beliefs, which can translate into practiced and etched values as they move on in their personal and professional careers. That is an important thing. And in terms of the third point that you said, Sudha ma'am, we'll be more than happy, Professor Ramakrishnan and I will be more than happy to connect with you offline And then if we could get some assistance in terms of, the approach as to who we can approach, because we've been trying to reach out to a few institutions and universities, we'll be more than happy to lend a helping hand to make sure that this is translated into all the languages. And another attempt that we're also trying to do is we can get this as part of the curriculum for universities at this point in time, because we thought that values given a slightly higher order of thinking. But I think this session has been a revelation, both in terms of Mr. Kannuswamy from Vidya Mandir and also you, and absolutely we will pursue it to look at schools and also translating into other languages. And I will ask, may I request, Saurav, when you share the mailer after this session, please do include both Professor Ramakrishnan and my email and contact numbers, and we would certainly like to connect to take things forward. And that is obviously one of the larger goals. We want to create more leaders who want to live a life driven by values and make a larger impact. Although we're in one corner of the world, we would certainly try to make an attempt to make this world a better place for all of us. And we very strongly believe that it's not just about us, but everybody else out there in this world. And we need to do our best and put our best foot forward and take it up from there. So thank you, Sudha ma'am. It was very revealing, and thank you for those wonderful sentiments that you expressed. Yeah.
Thank you. So I did not say anything that people did not know. So it was just that opportunities are there. We just need to tap it. That's all. Thank you.
Sure, absolutely, ma'am. We'll be more than happy to connect. Thank you so much.
You're welcome to connect. I have sent a connect to you on LinkedIn. We can talk whenever you're comfortable. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Would anyone like to ask any question? You can also type it on the chat window. Okay, one sec. Mr. Madikam has a question, but he's yet to complete it, I guess. I'll just try unmuting him.
Hello.
Yes, yes, sir. Thank you for giving this opportunity. Thank you very much for enlightening us on this evening. So you mentioned about Swami Vivekananda. Yes, I recently happened to listen his speech through YouTube. So really, it is like even after 100 years, so it is giving a lot of values. So I'm wondering what makes such a magnitude, like dynamic leadership? Like, is it by value or practice, as you have shown certain qualities? Like, is it by society or but we are not able to see such a dynamic personalities these days, or it is not visible to us. So how can we address, like, I can read the books, I can practice, still I see a gap in this, in that avenue.
So Monica, I'll ask you for thanking that question. It's $1 million question that we are trying to answer, both Professor Ramakrishnan and I. That is, as I said, at the beginning of the session, when we look back on some of the names that we could quote in terms of leaders who have really been absolutely truthful in terms of practicing values, there was only a handful of people that we could pick. And hence, we thought, whatever learnings that we've had in 40 years of Professor Ramakrishnan and 20 plus years of my journey, which should share it with the larger world. And as you said, just reflecting shortly on Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda was God incarnation. He had an excellent guru in Ramakrishna Paramahansa,
Yes.
who walked the talk and then taught him, and then he was able to relay all of this back to the world. In 1893, it was unimaginable that somebody could, muster the money and also the courage and effort to travel by ship all the way to America and then address it, in
Yes.
in the robes that he was present at that point in time. And I think another very pertinent remark that he made to another Western person was, in your culture, it is the dress that makes a gentleman. And, in our culture, it is the character which makes a gentleman. So I think the base or the fundamental rubrics of values is very much rooted in our system and beliefs and the way we have evolved as a country. So I think every drop in the ocean, every drop of water is important in an ocean. And I think all of us, by our effort in our own ways, towing the line of values and making sure that we don't veer away from our core beliefs and principles and the truthfulness that have held us together as a society and as a nation for thousands and millions of years. We should practice it. And you never know. As Mr. Kannaswamy said and Ms. Sudha said, there may be thousands of more Swami Vivekanandas being nurtured in our schools and universities, and we will be able to see more as we come. And I think it's in all of us. And if you recall the slide that I presented on the synopsis about the book, the last line said, "Here is a toast to the leader in all of us." So I think we have to believe that we all have the same traits, and as Swami Vivekananda, and we'll be able to contribute and make this world a better place for all of us. Absolutely. I think we just go with that belief, and leadership is all about being present here and now and then taking it up from there. Absolutely. And
Mr. Ramesh, I have a small request.
Okay.
Is it okay? This is for TiE, because TiE, we all mentor a lot of youngsters. Okay. That is, we have certain programs for young leaders and all of that. Just a little bit of the presentation that you had, some of the slides, with your permission, if you can share it with TiE, maybe some of it can be used, because that's how more people start using. Of course, we'll buy the books and we will use it, but this small presentation, if it is okay with you, and if it's all right within, if you think it's okay, a couple of slides, if you can share with TiE, then whenever we are handling some of these young leaders, anything is apt, many of us probably will be able to use it. This is something I'm requesting. If it is okay, you can share it with the Secretariat.
Absolutely. Thank you for asking me that. I would just like to have a quick word with Professor Ramakrishnan. I don't think we should have any issues when sharing this slide, because it's just a shortened version of whatever we have shared. And as I said, whilst I'm more than happy, we have more than 8 minutes to take more questions. Both Professor Ramakrishnan and I would be absolutely honored, to receive all of your feedback on the book, and we look forward to, a stronger and a longer association with TiE.
Yeah, sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? We still have 7 minutes to time.
Priya, I've not seen the chat box. Are there any other questions there?
No, sir, we haven't. We just had a question with Manikam. I think he spoke on the audio, but.
Okay, thank you.
I will add another question here. So, how the emotional intelligence is closely relevant to this leadership? Yes, there are leaders in corporates, there are leaders in their own avenues, but on the societal way to lead by example. So how this emotional intelligence can play a role, if you can share some thoughts.
Thank you for bringing up a very valid question and a comment, Mr. Manikam. Emotional quotient. Both Professor Ramakrishnan and I, we've learned so much from our mentors and leaders. When somebody behaves, responds, talks in a certain way in the office, it is important to understand what sort of a milieu or an environment or a background that somebody has been brought up in or raised. So certain people can respond to a situation or certain people can react to a situation. So it's important for us as individuals and leaders, we necessarily need not be a people manager, because when we are in the house or if we are outside the house, we don't have a choice, but we have to deal with people. So it augurs well for all of us to learn people management skills and also understand why somebody reacts, responds, or behaves or comments in a certain way. If we are able to appreciate the background, I think we'll be able to understand why somebody does that, and we will be able to, we ourselves as individual, when we deal with those people, we'll be able to respond. Think back, think through what happened, why any situation arose, and we will be able to respond in a much calm manner rather than reacting. Because in certain situations, I've seen that even I myself, at the spur of the moment, would have reacted in a different way. But then when I step back and then understand,
Yep.
it gives a much measured or a very thought through response. It always helps, and it's a win-win situation for both I and the person with whom I'm dealing with. So emotional intelligence does play a very, very important role in dealing with people, and also in terms of orchestrating values and towing values. So thank you for that
Yep.
very valid and
Thank you.
wonderful point that you brought up.
Thank you.
We've got a question in the chat. Mr. Shivaraman asks, what is your advice to youngsters with aspiration to become leaders?
Okay. Both Professor Ramakrishnan and I have discussed in length about this. In many of our individual reactions, in many of our offline conversations, in many of the forums that we addressed, the MMA and certain other public and personal forums that we've addressed. So our advice to youngsters is pick up all the positive things that you see from everybody around you. Keep your eyes and ears open. There is nobody in this world that you cannot learn from. Always look for the good and positive things. Think of values. Think of some of the greatest leaders. Think of some of the religious preachers that we have had, irrespective of whether they come from Christianity, whether they come from, Islam, or whether they come from Hinduism, sans all of that. At the end of the day, we all are human beings. It's extremely important for us to think on those lines. And one very important thing that seems to be conspicuous by absence is, read books, read newspapers, keep yourself updated as to what is happening in your immediate society, in your immediate state, in your country, in the world at a large, and then learn all of it. Because as both Professor and I feel, these thoughts, whatever you read, whatever you observe around you, will manifest itself at the right moment, and it'll help you becoming, excellent global citizens when you bloom as leaders in the future. So I think that's obviously the way to go. Thank you for that wonderful question that whoever asked that. Thank you for that.
Shivaraman.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Shivaram. Thank you for that.
Kannasamy wants to ask another.
Ramesh, one more suggestion is that leaders is very ocean. It has got, like, you have core values, you have the embedded values and other things. What I perhaps, if of course easy to advise, but it's difficult to, depends on all the constraints, to come out of the series of books. For example, leadership volume 1, volume 2, volume 3 on different subject, so that it becomes after 3 months, every 3 months or 6 months or every year, whatever it is, bi-monthly, or so that you have you get, now you have gone into a broader synopsis. Now, how do we take it from there? It's like the building a cycle. You have the spokes, you have the bell, you have the iron bar. So I think it'll be good for you to continue your journey on this, so that people, oh, what is the next book Ramesh Subramanian is going to revive and Ramakrishna is going to come out with on leadership? You can say that leadership of 2020, how companies face COVID. Okay. For example, I can give you an example of ITC, the stock expiring ATA and all in between April to August are all disposed by distribution to various slums. So there is leadership. For example, how you we don't waste your stock in inventories, and you distribute to all the people before it expires, before the COVID is. So I think you have to continue this as a part of a leadership, continuous, like LIFCO is to come out with various books series. So Ramesh Subramanian and Ramakrishna, I request you, your journey should be to continue in leadership, volume 1, volume 2, like this. Actually, we'll build a library of it.
Oh, yes, absolutely, sir. And, we've already thought through, and in the next few months, we'll be embarking on our next book, which is going to be Transformational Leadership. And probably we've also thought through what should be the third one from there, which is going to rest on some of our tenets from our religious texts, and how do we build leadership and governance around that. And we'll be more than happy to be sharing.
Sure, because I was reading about Howard Schultz on the Starbucks, how he became a leader, and the Winter Hopes in how we break at America 21. So I've been collecting I have about more than 100 books on leadership and how leaders different perform. For example, right from S.S. Vasan, who came from your own place, near your place, near your Chennai belt. How he said when he was the last Chandralekha, he was lost everything. He said, "Have you been back in the streets?" He said, "Amma Sonna Mari." Yes, we came from streets. We'll go back to streets. So there is a leader. How we became a leader. How we brought up Ananda Vikram. I'm prepared to serve because for me to help the society. That's it. And I want people like you to take it forward to other youngsters to come.
Oh yes, absolutely. I'm also reminded of the founder of Zoho, who lives a very simple life near Tenkasi. I mean, yeah, exactly. He rides a bicycle, and then he used to work as an entrepreneur in Silicon Valley, and he just comes back and he wants to give back.
Same with Warren Buffett. You
Exactly.
take Warren Buffett, and you can take so many leaders. See, if you think leaders are going to be flying in club class or best class. In fact, I've seen many leaders flying in the economy class and taking carrying this lunchbox. So I think simple living, high thinking is the very important.
Absolutely. And then there is probably, I don't want to draw a comparison here, but there is no other better society than India to, toe
in
this.
fact, whether we may produce highest producers of sugar and grains, but we are the highest producer of rishis and others.
Absolutely. And, I would certainly like to quote, Right Honorable Silvertongue Srinivasa Shastri, who was, one of the former principals of the Sanskrit College.
Yes.
In a lighter vein, when the Queen once asked him to talk about the Queen, he just shot back saying, "Queen was not a subject. Queen is not a subject." So, which was a pun intended, saying that he cannot talk about the Queen, and she obviously is not a subject, and Queen is not something that he can speak on. So, we've had such stalwarts coming from Chennai.
Sarvapalli Radhakrishnan, we can talk about so many. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you.
Any other questions, or can we close at 6:33 actually? So. All right. So thank you, sir. Thank you so much for taking this session, or teaching us whatever you have covered in the book, and I'm sure you also would have understood how the audiences and the participants feel about today's session, and definitely we will share the books to the participants who were part of this session today, also who couldn't be part of the session but did want to be here. So we'll ensure we do that. And the main takeaway in this is definitely the CIPE or EPIC, which you mentioned is the reverse of that, and it is an epic indeed. And thank you so much. I would like to mention about the reviews of the book available in various places. The first one is the Society for Business Ethics USA September newsletter, the Deccan Herald newspaper on the October 11th. There's also a write-up in the ET World online issue. And there's a mention in the Telegraph newspaper based in Kolkata on September 25th. The book was e-launched by MMA, that is Madras Management Association, on September 21st, the day on which they were adjudged the best management association in India for the 11th year in a row. That is really wonderful, sir. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, Professor. Although he couldn't, speak in the session, we are thankful to you, both of you, for coming up with this book, and thank you so much. I also want to extend my thanks to the participants today who were part of the session. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you, Saurav. Thank you, Mr. Shivram. And thank you all the guests and all the charter members of TiE for this wonderful opportunity. And just to add, I don't think the attempt was to teach anything that you all did not know. It was a very humble attempt to share whatever we had learned in our personal and professional journeys. So once again, we would like to place on record our thank you and for having given us the opportunity to present a few thoughts from our journeys in this book. And we look forward to a much longer and stronger association with TiE. Thank you once again.
Absolutely, sir. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.